The skull fits comfortably inside 2 cupped hands. It belonged to an adult woman 1 metre and 6 centimetres tall, carrying a brain 1/3 the size of yours. She was found in a cave on an Indonesian island, in sediment laid down, while our own species was already everywhere. When she was described as a new kind of human, serious scientists said, in print, that she was nothing of the sort. She was a sick modern person. That argument ran for more than a decade. In the western highlands of Flores there is a limestone cave called Liang Bua, which means cool cave. It is enormous, a domed chamber the size of a small church, its floor soft grey sediment meters deep. A Dutch missionary excavated there in the 1960s. Australian and Indonesian archaeologists came back at the start of this century with an ordinary question: when did modern humans first reach these islands? They were digging for us. They opened a trench near the eastern wall and kept going down. 6 meters down, in the last days of the 2003 field season, that trench produced a skull. Then a jaw, a pelvis, leg bones, and a nearly complete left foot, one individual, catalogued as LB1. The proportions made no sense. The brain case held around 400 cubic centimeters, chimpanzee territory, under 1/3 of a modern human average. The whole body stood barely over 1 meter. But the teeth were hominin teeth, the pelvis a walking pelvis, and the foot belonged to something that walked upright. The description ran in Nature in October of 2004, under a new species name, Homo floresiensis. The press found the better word within a day, the hobbit. But what actually detonated was not the size, it was the age. The bones were reported at roughly 18,000 years old, after the peak of the last ice age, after the painted caves of Europe, long after our species had reached Australia. The claim was that another kind of human had been alive, on an island, in the recent past, and nobody had noticed. The objection came almost immediately, and it deserves to be stated properly, because it was not foolish. Look at what was on the table: a single skeleton, 1 skull. From an island whose living population includes short-statured people. And a brain case that, in a modern human, would be a medical finding. The competing explanation was far cheaper: a Homo sapiens with a growth disorder, and an extraordinary conclusion drawn from one damaged individual. Put like that, and it was put like that, forcefully by senior people, the skeptics were doing their job. So the diagnoses arrived, each of them argued in a real journal by real specialists. Microcephaly first, in 2005, a developmental condition that produces a small brain in a small skull. Then Laron syndrome, an insensitivity to growth hormone that leaves adults very short. Then myxoedematous endemic cretinism, the consequence of severe iodine deficiency, proposed in 2008. And then, as late as 2014, Down syndrome. 4 separate conditions across 11 years, each of which would account for a small body carrying a small head. Here is the part that usually gets left out of the telling. Every one of those was tested, and the tests were specific. Falk and colleagues built a virtual endocast from a scan of the inside of the skull, and compared its shape with microcephalic brains. It did not match them. It did match fossil hominins. Barb and colleagues ran geometric morphometrics on the cranium against samples of hypothyroid skulls, Laron syndrome skulls, and microcephalics, and LB1 fell outside every pathological group, sitting closest to Homo erectus. The Down syndrome proposal was answered the same way, point by point. But the argument that actually closed it came from 2 directions, and neither was about the skull. The first is arithmetic. Liang Bua did not produce 1 individual, it produced parts of at least 9, including a second adult jaw that matches the first, and the same short limb proportions again and again. A rare disorder does not run through an entire cave. The second is the wrist. 3 small bones in LB1's wrist are shaped as they are in African apes and early hominins, and that shape is laid down before birth, which is exactly why a growth disorder in a modern human cannot produce it. If she is not a sick modern human, the size still needs an explanation, and biology has a well-worn one. Put a large mammal on a small island, and over enough generations it tends to get smaller. The reasons are unglamorous: there is less food, and no way to leave. There are usually fewer large predators, so size buys less protection. Smaller bodies mature sooner and need less. The pattern is regular enough to have a name, the island rule, and it is documented worldwide in deer, hippos, and elephants. Flores proves the point in its own sediments, because the cave holds the animal it happened to. Stegodon was a genus of elephant relatives, and on Flores it shrank more than once. The older form from the Central Basin is estimated near 850 kilograms. The later one at Liang Bua comes in around 500. An earlier Flores species stood little more than a metre at the shoulder. The island did to an elephant precisely what it is proposed to have done to a hominin. Brains are the expensive part. Nervous tissue costs a great deal of energy per gram, continuously. And on an island with a hard ceiling on food, that cost is under pressure like everything else. So a reduction in brain size is not a malfunction, it is a budget, settled over thousands of generations. And absolute size is a poor guide to capability, because organization matters. The endocast shows a reorganized frontal region rather than a simply shrunken brain. Stone tools were being struck on that island for hundreds of thousands of years by something with a chimpanzee-sized head. There is a serious alternative though, and it is still live. Dwarfing assumes they arrived large, that Homo erectus reached Flores and shrank. The foot argues against that. It is very long relative to the leg, the toes are long and curved, the big toe is short, and there is no arch at all. A foot built for walking and poorly built for running, and one that looks primitive rather than reduced. Jungers, who described it, put the objection sharply. Dwarfing from erectus would demand an extraordinary number of evolutionary reversals, all of them unexplained. Perhaps they simply arrived small. The island they lived on reads like something invented. Alongside the dwarf Stegodon, there were rats the size of rabbits. One of them still lives on Flores and runs to something like 40 centimeters from nose to tail. There were Komodo dragons, far more widely spread then than on the handful of islands they cling to now. There were vultures. And there was a marabou stork standing close to 2 meters tall, described in 2010, bareheaded and heavy build, which was almost certainly working the same carcasses these hominins were interested in. The setting was not the closed jungle most people picture. Pollen and sediment from the Soa Basin, where the oldest fossils come from, indicate a relatively dry climate and open grassland with wetland patches in it. Liang Bua itself sits in limestone country above a river, its mouth high in a pale cliff. And the cave was not a home in any domestic sense. It was a place where things accumulated, washed in, dragged in, or died there, which is what makes a cave floor such a rich archive, and such a genuinely difficult one to read correctly. The stone tools at Liang Bua are simple, and they are consistent, sharp flakes struck from river cobbles in one continuous tradition, through layers spanning something like 140,000 years. What has changed is what we think was being done with them. That familiar picture, small people cooking dwarf elephant over fires in the cave, has largely been withdrawn. Microscopic analysis of the sediments found fireplaces at Liang Bua only between about 41 and 24,000 years ago, and none at all across the whole span these hominins were present. The hearths are almost certainly ours. How far back the lineage goes is the part that surprised everybody. About 70 kilometers east at Mata Menge in the Soa Basin, excavation produced a fragment of jaw and a handful of teeth around 700,000 years old, and they are not larger than the Liang Bua fossils. They are slightly smaller. A tiny piece of upper arm bone from the same deposit, published in 2024, says the same thing even more bluntly. If films about the vanished world are your kind of thing, subscribe. Whatever made them small had already finished by then. Which brings us back to that 18,000-year figure, because it is wrong, and the way it went wrong is worth understanding. The floor of Liang Bua is not layered like a cake. Part of the deposit had been eroded into a pedestal, and then buried by much younger sediment, banked up against its sloping side, so charcoal collected near the skeleton was in fact very much younger than the skeleton. A full re-excavation and redating, published in 2016, moved the skeletal remains back to between roughly 100,000 and 60,000 years old, with tools continuing to around 50. That revision quietly deleted the most thrilling part of the story. They were not alive at the end of the Ice Age after all. They were gone by about 50,000 years ago, which is close to when modern humans were moving through this region, and it is very tempting to draw the obvious line between those two facts. The honest position is that there is no evidence of the two species meeting at Liang Bua, no shared layer, no contact, nothing. Their disappearance also coincides with the loss of the stegodon, the stork, and the vultures. Something changed on that island, we do not know what. There is a local story on Flores about the Ebugogo, small hairy people who lived in caves, ate anything, and were driven off within living memory. It is a coincidence, and best left as one. 50,000 years is not within anyone's memory, and tales of little people in the forest are common the world over. The better ending is the one the bones already give you. For most of the last million years, there was more than one kind of human on this planet, and one of them stood a metre tall on an island and made tools. We were nearly right to find her impossible. We were wrong to insist she was ill.